The evening air was crisp on Jeju Island as Park Hee-jin locked up her small veterinary clinic. The autumn wind rustled through the tall grass, carrying the scent of the sea. She checked her phone one last time, reading a message from old Mr. Kim about his sick cow. Even though her workday was technically over, Hee-jin couldn't ignore an animal in need. She climbed into her weathered blue truck, the engine grumbling to life as she turned the key. The narrow country road wound through fields where farmers had already harvested their crops, leaving only stubble under the starlit sky. Her headlights cut through the growing darkness as she made her way to the Kim family farm. The first strange sign was the way the clouds above started glowing. At first, Hee-jin thought it might be the moon breaking through, but the light was different, more blue than silver. She slowed her truck, eyes drawn upward as the glow intensified. Something was moving up there, leaving a trail of light that grew brighter and brighter. Then came the sound, a high-pitched whine that made her ears hurt. Hee-jin pulled over, getting out of her truck to watch as whatever it was streaked across the sky. It wasn't like any airplane she'd ever seen. The object was spinning, pieces breaking off as it descended. Her heart started beating faster when she realized it was heading straight for the rice fields ahead. The impact wasn't the explosion she expected. Instead, there was a strange crackling sound, like ice breaking, followed by a soft thump. Blue light pulsed from behind a row of trees, drawing her forward despite her fear. Hee-jin grabbed her medical bag from the truck. Veterinarian's instinct, she would later say. As she approached the crash site, the air felt different. Tiny sparkles floated around her, catching the strange blue light. The object that had fallen was about the size of a small car, but like nothing she'd ever seen before. Its surface looked like flowing water frozen in time, with patterns that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. "Hello," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. "Is anyone there?" A sound answered her, something between a whisper and a chime. Hee-jin moved closer, her boots crunching on fragments that looked like shattered crystal. That's when she saw movement through a crack in the vessel's surface. Inside was a being that made her gasp. It looked almost human in shape, but its body was partially transparent, like living glass. Where it was injured, light leaked out instead of blood. The creature was trying to move but seemed stuck, making those chiming sounds that somehow carried feelings of pain and fear. Hee-jin's training took over. Whatever this was, it was hurt and needed help. She set down her medical bag and spoke in what she hoped was a soothing voice. "It's okay. I'm here to help. I'm a doctor. Well, an animal doctor, but still a doctor." The being turned to look at her, and Hee-jin saw its eyes. They were like swirling galaxies in miniature. Despite its alien appearance, she could read the pain and fear in those eyes. The creature reached out one delicate hand toward her, its fingers so fine they looked like strands of spun glass. Moving slowly, Hee-jin reached back. When their hands met, she was surprised by how warm it felt, like touching sunlight. The being made another chiming sound, but this one seemed less frightened. "My name is Hee-jin," she said, pointing to herself. "Park Hee-jin." The creature blinked those stunning eyes and made a sound that somehow formed words in her mind. "Taemin." It touched its chest carefully. "I am Taemin." Working with gentle movements, Hee-jin helped Taemin out of the damaged vessel. His body was incredibly light, and she could see that every movement caused him pain. The areas where light leaked out seemed to be their equivalent of wounds. She noticed that Taemin was wearing something like a suit made of flowing liquid metal, but it was damaged in several places. When she tried to help him stand, his leg almost shattered under even that slight pressure. Hee-jin quickly changed her approach, supporting him as if he were made of the thinnest bubble glass. "I need to get you somewhere safe," she said, though she wasn't sure if he could understand her words or just her intent. "My clinic. I can help you there." Taemin made another chiming sound that she somehow knew meant agreement. As Hee-jin carefully helped him toward her truck, the blue light from his ship began to fade. She looked back to see the vessel seeming to melt into the ground, disappearing like morning dew under the sun. Using all her skill from handling injured animals, Ho-Jin managed to get Ta-Min into her truck without causing further harm. As she drove slowly back to her clinic, taking care to avoid every bump in the road, she glanced at her passenger. Tai-Min sat perfectly still, his crystalline form catching the dashboard lights and breaking them into tiny rainbows. Ho-Jin knew her life had just changed forever. She had no idea what Tai-Min was or where he came from, but she knew with absolute certainty that she had to help him. As they drove through the quiet countryside, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they too were watching this moment when two worlds first touched. The night that had started so normally had become something extraordinary, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Ho-Jin wondered if she was the first human to ever meet someone from another world. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was sure of one thing. She would do everything in her power to help this beautiful, fragile being who had quite literally fallen from the stars. Inside Ho-Jin's clinic, the overhead lights cast a soft glow as she carefully examined Ta-Min's injuries. His crystalline body seemed to catch every beam of light, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the walls. She had cleared her examination room of anything that might accidentally bump or harm him, leaving only the padded table where he now rested. Ta-Min watched her movements with those galaxy-filled eyes, his body tensing slightly whenever she came close. Ho-Jin could understand his fear. To him, she must seem like a giant, her hands probably looking as dangerous as construction equipment would to a human. She moved with deliberate slowness, showing him each tool before she used it. The injuries themselves were unlike anything she'd ever treated. Where his crystalline form was damaged, light leaked out in pulses that matched what she assumed was his heartbeat. Ho-Jin had worked with delicate animals before, tiny birds with hollow bones, newborn kittens whose skulls hadn't fully formed. But Tai-Min's fragility was on another level entirely. When she accidentally brushed against his arm too firmly, a small crack appeared. The sound Tai-Min made was like breaking glass mixed with a whimper, and Ho-Jin's heart nearly stopped. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't understand her words. She pointed to herself and made gestures of apology, and somehow his eyes conveyed forgiveness. Ho-Jin grabbed her notebook and drew a simple picture of her helping him, then pointed to her medical supplies. Tai-Min studied the drawing, then made a gentle chiming sound she took as agreement. He lifted one delicate hand and traced patterns in the air that left faint trails of light. Ho-Jin realized he was trying to communicate too. She brought out bandages and healing creams, but quickly discovered they wouldn't work on his unique physiology. Instead, she noticed that when she directed certain wavelengths of light at his wounds, the leaking light seemed to stabilize. Ho-Jin experimented with different colored filters from her optical equipment, watching carefully as Ta-Min's reactions told her which ones helped and which ones caused discomfort. Through trial and error, they developed a way to communicate about pain. Tai-Min would touch a spot that hurt and produce a specific tone. The higher the pitch, the worse the pain. Ho-Jin would respond by adjusting her treatment until the tones became lower and eventually stopped. As the night went on, Ho-Jin discovered that her steady hands, trained by years of veterinary work, were perfect for handling Ta-Min's delicate form. She used cotton swabs dipped in sterile water to clean around his wounds, noticing how his skin seemed to absorb the moisture and grow stronger. When she held up a mirror to show him the improvement, his whole body glowed slightly brighter. They spent hours working on a better way to communicate. Ho-Jin brought out children's picture books, and they took turns pointing at objects and sharing their words for them. Ta-Min's language was beautiful, part musical tones, part light patterns, and part something that seemed to speak directly to Ho-Jin's mind. By morning, they had created a simple dictionary of drawings and gestures. Tai-Min could now tell her when something hurt, when he was hungry, though they still hadn't figured out what he could eat, and when he was tired. Ho-Jin learned that his people called themselves the Aetherians, and that they came from a place very far away. What amazed her most was how Ta Min's fear gradually changed to trust. At first, he had flinched from her touch, but now he would reach out to guide her hands where they were needed. His trust in her felt like a precious gift, as delicate as his crystalline form. When He Jin had to treat a particularly painful area, she found herself humming softly, an old habit she used to calm nervous animals. To her surprise, Ta Min's body began to resonate with her tune, creating harmonies that filled the room with gentle music. The combination of their voices seemed to ease his pain, and they developed a habit of humming together during treatments. As the sun rose, He Jin realized she had spent the entire night caring for him. She was exhausted but satisfied with their progress. Most of his major injuries had been stabilized, though he was still far from healed. Tai Min made a series of gentle chiming sounds that somehow conveyed deep gratitude, and his hand reached out to touch hers with the lightest of contacts. In that moment, He Jin understood something profound about strength and gentleness. Here she was, a being who could accidentally destroy him with one wrong move, yet he trusted her completely. And here he was, seemingly so fragile, yet possessing the courage to place his life in her hands. She helped him settle into a comfortable position on a bed of the softest materials she could find, making sure he was stable before she went to prepare for the day's regular patients. As she worked, He Jin couldn't help but smile, thinking about how her years of treating everything from tiny hamsters to large farm animals had prepared her for something she could never have imagined: helping a being from another world heal. The morning light streamed through the windows, and Ta Min's body caught the rays, filling the room with dancing lights. He Jin watched him rest, his form pulsing gently with what she now recognized as his breathing, and felt honored to be trusted with something so precious and unique. The back room of He Jin's clinic had always been used for storage, but now it served a much more important purpose. She had carefully cleared out the old supplies and equipment, replacing them with soft cushions and gentle lighting that helped Tai Min heal. The windows were covered with special filters that protected him from harsh sunlight, while still letting in the soft morning glow he seemed to need. Every morning before her regular patients arrived, He Jin would bring him different foods to try. They discovered that while he couldn't eat solid food, he could absorb certain liquids, particularly things that conducted light well. Clear broths became his favorite, and he showed special interest in He Jin's homemade barley tea. One quiet afternoon, Ta Min used their growing system of gestures and drawings to explain about his home world. He drew pictures of a planet with 3 moons, where everything weighed much less than on Earth. He showed her how his people could float and glide in their natural environment, their crystalline bodies perfect for their world's gentle gravity. He Jin was amazed when Ta Min demonstrated his species' mental abilities. He could solve complex mathematical equations instantly, showing her the answers by creating patterns of light in the air. When she brought him her laptop, his understanding of its technology was so advanced that he could communicate with it just by touching the screen, the code flowing like water under his fingertips. But what fascinated Ta Min most was how He Jin handled the animals in her care. He would watch through the specially filtered window as she treated her patients, studying how she could be firm yet gentle with a struggling dog, or how she could calm a frightened cat with just her voice and touch. The concept that strength could be used to protect rather than harm seemed to amaze him. During quiet evenings, He Jin would bring her old radio to the back room. Tai Min became enchanted by Korean music, his body literally glowing in rhythm with the melodies. He seemed especially moved by traditional songs, his crystalline form creating beautiful light patterns that danced with the music. They developed a deeper way of communicating as the weeks passed. Tai Min learned to modify his chiming language so He Jin could understand it better, while she learned to recognize the subtle changes in his light patterns that indicated his emotions. She discovered that Aetherians didn't usually express feelings the way humans did. They considered emotions inefficient, but Tai Min was learning to embrace these new experiences. One day, He Jin found him trying to hold a small injured bird she was treating. Despite his incredible mental powers, it took him several attempts to master the delicate touch needed. When he finally succeeded, the joy that radiated from his body lit up the entire room. It was the first time He-Jin saw him express pure happiness. They had to be careful about keeping his presence secret. He-Jin told her few employees that the back room was being renovated, and she installed a special lock that only she could open. When delivery people came, Ta-Min would dim his natural glow and remain perfectly still, looking like an unusual art installation in the corner. The most challenging moments came when other doctors or specialists visited the clinic. Ta-Min's presence had to be completely hidden then, as his light could sometimes be seen through the smallest gaps. During these times, he would retreat to a special alcove He-Jin had created, lined with light-absorbing materials. As time went on, Ta-Min began sharing more about his society. The Etherians had evolved beyond the need for emotional connections, focusing purely on intellectual advancement. But as he described this to He-Jin, she noticed his light patterns showed something like sadness or longing. He-Jin started teaching him about human relationships, how families supported each other, how friends shared both joy and sorrow, how people could care deeply for animals and each other. At first, Ta-Min found these concepts difficult to understand, but gradually she noticed him developing his own emotional responses. The day He-Jin caught a cold and had to work while feeling sick, Ta-Min showed his first real concern for another being. He tried to help by using his abilities to regulate the room's temperature and created soothing light patterns that actually helped ease her headache. When she thanked him, his response was not the usual logical acknowledgement, but a warm glow that clearly showed worry and care. Their secret arrangement worked well, but both knew it couldn't last forever. Sometimes at night, they would see strange lights in the sky that made Ta-Min's glow dim with anxiety. He-Jin knew his people must be looking for him, and despite the joy of their friendship, she worried about what would happen when they finally found him. Still, each day they spent together brought new discoveries. Ta-Min learned about humor and started attempting to make jokes through his light patterns. He-Jin learned about the vastness of space and the incredible achievements of his civilization. Together, they created something unique, a bridge between two vastly different worlds, built on understanding and trust. The cherry blossoms filled the air with soft pink petals as spring arrived on Jeju Island. He-Jin had moved her Gaigium into the back room, setting it up where Ta-Min could watch her play from a safe distance. His crystalline form seemed to shimmer with excitement whenever she brought out the traditional instrument. "This song is about spring," He-Jin explained through their now fluent system of gestures and light patterns. Her fingers moved across the strings, creating melodies that had been played on the island for hundreds of years. Ta-Min's body pulsed with each note, creating harmonies of light that danced with the music. As He-Jin played, she watched Ta-Min's reactions. Where once his responses had been measured and analytical, now they'd flowed with genuine feeling. His light patterns had become more complex, showing subtle variations that reminded her of human expressions. When she finished the song, the glow that emanated from him was warm and bright, like sunlight through stained glass. They spent evenings learning about each other's worlds. He-Jin told stories of Korean festivals, describing the Lantern Festival where thousands of lights filled the night sky. Ta-Min's response was to create a miniature version of the festival in the room, his body projecting countless tiny points of light that swirled around them like fireflies. One quiet afternoon, while rain tapped gently on the windows, Ta-Min shared something profound. Through their special communication, he explained that his people had once been different. Long ago, they too had celebrated and felt deeply, but as their bodies grew more fragile and their minds more powerful, they chose to leave emotions behind. They saw feelings as a weakness, something that held them back from pure logical advancement. He-Jin sat quietly, watching the play of lights that showed Ta-Min's inner struggle as he spoke. She had learned to read these patterns like a face. The quick flashes of uncertainty, the slow pulses of contemplation, the bright bursts of realization. He was changing, experiencing things his people had forgotten centuries ago. When the spring festivals began, He-Jin brought traditional foods to share with Ta-Min. Though he couldn't eat them, he could experience their essence by touching the surface of the dishes with his delicate fingers, reading their molecular structure. His joy at discovering the complexity of flavors made He-Jin laugh, a sound that always caused his light to brighten. They developed a daily routine. In the mornings, before the clinic opened, they would share what humans called breakfast, with He-Jin eating rice and soup while Ta-Min absorbed light through the special filters she had installed. During the day, while she worked, he would study human culture through the books and videos she brought him, his curiosity seeming endless. Sometimes, He-Jin would find him attempting to recreate human art with his light-bending abilities. He created three-dimensional versions of famous paintings, his interpretation adding new depths to familiar works. When she brought him pictures of Korean pottery, he spent hours studying the patterns, then reproduced them in floating light sculptures that filled his room. Their conversations grew deeper. Ta-Min began asking questions about emotions he was experiencing. Confusion about the way his light patterns changed when He-Jin entered the room, warmth when she played music for him, worry when she worked late. She explained these feelings carefully, watching as he processed each new emotional discovery. He-Jin found herself sharing more personal stories about her childhood on the island, her decision to become a veterinarian, her dreams and fears. Ta-Min listened with an intensity that made her feel truly heard, his responses showing an understanding that went beyond mere logic. One evening, during a spectacular sunset, Ta-Min created a display of lights that took He-Jin's breath away. It was a story told in light and shadow, showing his journey from the stars to Earth. But more than that, it showed his journey from logical detachment to emotional awakening. The display ended with a pattern she had never seen before, one that seemed to pulse with something very much like love. They both knew the meaning of this moment, though neither had words to express it. He-Jin's hand moved instinctively toward him, stopping just short of touching his delicate form. Ta-Min's light reached out to meet her fingers, creating a connection that needed no translation. As spring deepened into early summer, their bond grew stronger. He-Jin found herself rushing through her work to spend more time with him. Ta-Min developed what could only be called a sense of humor, creating playful light shows that made He-Jin laugh until tears came to her eyes. But with their growing closeness came new concerns. Sometimes Ta-Min's light would dim with worry about his people finding him, not because he feared rescue, but because he feared being separated from He-Jin. She too felt this fear, though she tried to hide it. They both knew their time together might be limited, which made each moment more precious. Still, they continued to share and learn from each other. He-Jin discovered that strength wasn't just in her careful hands, but in her willingness to open her heart to someone so different from herself. Ta-Min learned that emotions, far from being a weakness, gave him a new kind of power, the power to connect, to care, to love. As spring flowers bloomed and faded, their unique bond continued to grow, defying the vast differences between their species. In the quiet moments they shared, both He-Jin and Ta-Min knew they had found something rare and beautiful, a connection that bridged the gap between stars. The news broke on a quiet Tuesday morning. He-Jin was checking her phone during a short break when every news alert started flashing at once. 3 massive objects had appeared in Earth's orbit, their crystalline structures catching sunlight and creating spectacular displays visible even during daylight hours. Inside the clinic's back room, Ta-Min's body pulsed with an anxious light as they watched the news together on He-Jin's tablet. The Aetherian ships looked like enormous diamonds, their surfaces flowing with patterns that He-Jin now recognized as their written language. Their appearance had thrown human governments into chaos, with emergency meetings being called across the globe. "They're looking for you," He-Jin said softly, though she didn't need to. The messages being broadcast from the ships were visible in the sky at night, creating aurora-like displays that Ta-Min translated for her. They were calling for their lost scout to respond, promising rescue and return to their world. Ta Min's light patterns showed his inner turmoil. He created a complex display that told Hejin about his duty to his people, their advanced civilization, and their carefully ordered society. But then his lights dimmed, showing something new. Fear, not of his people, but of losing what he had found on Earth. The world outside was changing quickly. Military aircraft patrolled the skies, and news reporters crowded the islands, hoping to catch glimpses of the alien ships. Hejin had to be extra careful now, checking and double-checking that no light escaped from Ta Min's room when anyone was near. One evening, as they watched another broadcast about the ships, Ta Min shared something that made Hejin's heart ache. Through their special language, he explained that returning to his people would mean being corrected, having his newly developed emotions deemed a malfunction and removed. The Etherians saw feelings as a sign of corruption, something to be eliminated for the good of their perfect society. Hejin found herself facing an impossible choice. As a veterinarian, she had sworn to help those in need, but now helping Ta Min might mean protecting him from his own people. She watched him create beautiful light patterns that showed joy, worry, and love, emotions that his society would see as flaws to be erased. The search intensified. The Aetherian ships began scanning the planet's surface with beams of light that Ta Min said could detect their kind's unique energy signature. Each night, the beams grew closer to Jeju Island, making their hearts race whenever one passed nearby. Hejin started making preparations. She converted part of her basement into a shielded room, using materials Ta Min helped her identify that could block his energy signature. They spent tense days moving him between hiding spots as the search patterns changed, always just one step ahead of discovery. The whole world held its breath, waiting to see what these advanced beings would do. Scientists talked about the technological advances they might share. Politicians worried about Earth's defenses, but Hejin could only think about the gentle being who had trusted her with his care and his heart. Late one night, as they sat in the basement hiding from another scan, Ta Min created a light pattern more complex than any Hejin had seen before. It showed his home world, beautiful and orderly, but cold and empty of the warmth he had found on Earth. Then he showed her what he had learned here, the joy of music, the beauty of imperfection, the strength found in gentleness, and most importantly, the power of love. Hejin reached out, her hand hovering near his crystalline form, as she had done so many times before. This time, Ta Min moved closer, allowing the lightest touch. The contact sent sparkles of light dancing around them, and in that moment, they both knew they couldn't let his people take these feelings away. But their time was running out. The search beams were methodically covering every inch of the island, and the basement wouldn't hide them forever. They needed to make a decision. Should Ta Min reveal himself to his people and try to make them understand what he had discovered? Or should they try to keep hiding, knowing it might be impossible? The answer came in an unexpected way. As they watched another news broadcast, they saw an Etherian representative appear before the United Nations. The being looked like Ta Min, but showed no sign of emotion or warmth. Its message was clear. They wanted their lost scout returned, and they would not leave until they found him. Ta Min's light dimmed to almost nothing as he watched his people's representative. Hejin could feel his fear and sadness, but also something else, determination. Through their shared language of light and gesture, he told her he couldn't go back to being what he was before. He had changed too much, learned too much, felt too much. As another search beam swept past the clinic, Hejin made her decision. She would protect Ta Min, whatever it took. She had sworn an oath to help those in her care, and that meant protecting not just his physical form, but also the beautiful, feeling being he had become. Together, they would find a way to face what was coming, even if it meant standing against the most advanced civilization humanity had ever encountered. The Aetherian ships continued their relentless search, their crystal forms casting rainbow lights across the Earth. But in a small basement on Jeju Island, Two beings from different worlds held on to something more powerful than advanced technology, the connection they had built together, and their determination to protect it at any cost. The day Taemin decided to face his people dawned bright and clear on Jeju Island. Hajin stood beside him in the open field where he had first crashed, her hand steady despite her racing heart. They had chosen this moment carefully, waiting until the search beam was directly overhead before Taemin released his full glow into the sky. The response was immediate. The beam locked onto his position, and within minutes, a smaller crystal vessel descended from one of the massive ships above. Hajin watched as it landed with impossible gentleness, barely disturbing the grass beneath it. The vessel's surface rippled like water, and three Aetherian figures emerged. The tallest Aetherian moved forward, broadcasting a pattern that clearly meant for Taemin to step away from the dangerous human. Instead, Taemin moved closer to Hajin, his light patterns showing both determination and something new, pride. He began to share their story through light and sound, showing how Hajin had saved him, healed him, and taught him about human emotions. The council members' reactions were clear in their rigid postures and harsh light patterns. They saw Taemin's emotional displays as signs of contamination, evidence that he had been corrupted by his time among humans. One of them reached out with a device that Hajin recognized from Taemin's descriptions, a tool for emotional correction. But before they could use it, Hajin stepped forward. Moving with the same careful precision she used in treating injured animals, she reached for the device. The council members froze, probably expecting her to crush it. Instead, her fingers danced over its crystalline surface with perfect control, examining its structure without causing even a microscopic scratch. Taemin translated their shocked reactions for her. Never had they seen a being of such physical strength handle their technology with such delicacy. Hajin then demonstrated her skills further, showing them how she had treated Taemin's injuries, her movements so precise that even their sensitive instruments could detect no threat in her touch. The council members huddled together, their light patterns shifting rapidly as they communicated. Taemin continued his defense, sharing memory after memory of his time on Earth. He showed them the music Hajin had played for him, the art they had created together, the gentle care she had shown not just to him, but to all living things in her clinic. The youngest council member seemed the first to understand. Its light patterns began to show subtle variations, tiny flickers of curiosity breaking through the logical facade. It moved closer, watching as Hajin used her steady hands to create a small light sculpture Taemin had taught her to make. Hours passed as they talked, with Taemin translating between the two species. Hajin shared stories of human relationships, of how strength could be used to protect rather than harm, of how emotions made them stronger rather than weaker. She showed them videos of her work with animals, demonstrating how understanding and gentleness could calm even the most frightened creatures. The council's rigid patterns gradually began to shift. Their horror at Taemin's emotional displays turned to fascination as they saw how these feelings had enhanced rather than diminished his abilities. His light patterns were more complex than theirs now, capable of expressing subtle meanings their logical communications couldn't match. When Hajin brought out her gaejum and played for them, their response was remarkable. The youngest council member's light actually flickered in rhythm with the music, showing the first spontaneous emotional response their species had displayed in centuries. The others watched in amazement as their companion experienced something they had long thought impossible. Taemin seized this moment to make his final argument. Through elaborate light patterns, he showed them how emotions and logic could work together, how feeling and thinking could create something greater than either alone. He demonstrated how his time with the Jinn had not just changed him, but improved him. As the sun began to set, the council reached a decision that would change both their worlds. They would not force Taemin to return or undergo correction. Instead, they wanted to learn more about this unexpected discovery, how humans manage to be both powerful and gentle, both emotional and rational. The Jinn watched as Taemin's light blazed with joy at their decision. The council members, attempting to understand this display, asked for permission to study human culture and behavior. Their request showed the first signs of humility their species had exhibited in generations. As twilight painted the sky in purple and gold, the council prepared to return to their ship. But this time, they didn't leave with just Tom Min's report. They left with a new understanding of strength and weakness, of the power of emotions, and of how much their advanced civilization might still have to learn from the species they had once dismissed as dangerous. The new Etherian embassy on Jeju Island sparkled like a crystal garden in the morning sun. Its delicate spires and flowing surfaces had become a symbol of hope, drawing visitors from both Earth and the stars. Inside, He-Jin walked through specially designed corridors where humans and Etherians could safely interact, her footsteps sure and familiar after months of working in this remarkable place. She found Tom Min in their shared office, his light patterns dancing with joy at her arrival. The room perfectly balanced their needs, strong enough to protect the Etherians' fragile forms while allowing them to create their beautiful light displays. Together, they had helped design much of the embassy, making sure it served both species comfortably. Their morning routine had become famous among the embassy staff. He-Jin would bring her traditional Korean breakfast, while Tai-Min absorbed light through the special windows they had designed together. They would share stories about their latest projects. He-Jin's work teaching human medical professionals how to care for Etherian visitors, and Ta-Min's efforts to help his people rediscover their emotional capabilities. The changes in Etherian society had been remarkable. More and more of them were choosing to visit Earth, curious about the species that had helped them remember what they had lost. Each visitor would spend time at He-Jin's clinic, learning how strength could be gentle and how emotions could enhance rather than hinder understanding. One morning, a young Etherian arrived at the embassy, its light patterns showing the rigid control typical of their homeworld. He-Jin and Tai-Min watched as it experienced Earth's music for the first time. Just like Ta-Min months before, its light began to pulse with the rhythm, showing the first cracks in its emotional walls. Their love story had spread across both worlds, inspiring others to look past surface differences. Human scientists learned to move with incredible precision, while Etherians began to explore the emotions they had suppressed for so long. Art galleries in the embassy displayed works created by both species, human paintings hanging beside Etherian-like sculptures, each enhanced by the other's presence. He-Jin still ran her veterinary clinic, but it had grown into something more. With Ta-Min's help, she had adapted her gentle healing techniques to care for injured Etherians. Other veterinarians came to learn from her, amazed by how skills used for treating delicate animals could be perfect for helping these crystalline beings. The embassy hosted regular cultural exchanges. He-Jin would play her gaejum, while Etherians created light shows that danced with her music. Human children would visit, their natural gentleness making them perfect companions for the fragile aliens. The Etherians, in turn, shared their vast knowledge of the universe, teaching humans about distant stars and advanced mathematics. Ta-Min had become a bridge between worlds in more ways than one. His emotional growth had shown his people that change was possible, that feeling deeply didn't mean losing oneself. Other Etherians began to follow his example, learning to balance their logical nature with newfound emotions. Their personal relationship had grown stronger too. He-Jin and Tai-Min had developed ways to express their love that worked for both of them. Though they couldn't touch like human couples, their connection showed in other ways. In shared light patterns, in music played together, in the perfect understanding that had grown between them. The embassy became famous for its garden, where earth plants grew alongside crystalline structures that the Etherians created. Here, He-Jin and Tai-Min would often sit together, watching sunlight play through both natural and alien beauty. It was a perfect symbol of what they had achieved. Two very different worlds growing stronger together. Other alien species began to take notice. The story of how humanity had helped the Etherians rediscover their emotional depths spread across the galaxy. Diplomats from other worlds came to study this unique partnership, amazed by how two such different species had found strength in their differences. The Jin and Tanmen's example inspired new scientific discoveries too. Human engineers, learning from Aetherian technology, developed more precise tools and gentler ways of working with delicate materials. Aetherian scientists, influenced by human emotion, made breakthroughs their purely logical approach had missed. As seasons changed on Jeju Island, their legacy continued to grow. Young humans and Aetherians worked together in the embassy, learning from each other's strengths. The feared, dangerous humans had become trusted protectors, while the weak Aetherians shared wisdom accumulated over centuries. One evening, as they watched the sunset paint the embassy's crystal towers in golden light, Hejin and Taimin reflected on their journey. From a crashed ship in a field to this symbol of interstellar cooperation, they had changed not just their own lives, but the course of two civilizations. Their story had become more than just a romance between two beings from different worlds. It had become proof that the greatest strength comes not from power or protection alone, but from the willingness to understand and care for those different from ourselves. In their love, both species had found something precious, a way to be stronger together than they ever could have been apart.